four really amazing women at this particular session that I went to. We Power Tech is a pretty large program, and I sat in on a session with, let's see, it was Teresa Carlson, Eva Chen from Trend Micro, Amy Gradnick, and then Lakeisha Grant Shepard as well. They were all the four panelists. And the topic was on growth and abundance mentality, specifically talking about women in technology or minorities in technology. And of course, for me, as a white dude going to this conference, I have a lot to learn and gain from the voices of these individuals. Hey friends, good morning. It's day 4 here at AWS reInvent out in Las Vegas. Having a pretty crazy awesome week, and of course digging into all of the AWS new announcements that have been coming out. A lot of great services. In fact, here in a few minutes I'm going to be heading over to check out the Warner Vogel's keynote here today. Probably some more great announcements on our way. When I get back home to Asheville, I'll be sure to do a nice recap on some of my favorite services. I definitely talked to a lot of people this week and try to get a nice top 10 list of major announcements that are going to be impactful for a lot of organizations. One that I heard about yesterday was pretty interesting. Transit Gateway now. Not only does it support inter-region VPC peering, but it also supports IP multicast within the AWS environment. Now, this is one that's been a long time coming. A lot of organizations have struggled to use multicast in AWS without having to use like VPN networks that live on top of it. So this is probably going to solve a lot of solutions for a lot of people. We'll be looking a little bit more about how that's going to help us out down the road. Now, just to kind of recap, the last couple of days, since we last talked on Tuesday afternoon, I got into a really exciting session on using IoT Core and the IoT Greengrass packages to solve non-IoT problems. It was pretty sweet. The scenario that the guy was particularly talking about was in a manufacturing kind of a power plant facility area where they had a whole bunch of interesting remote gauges that they needed to read. Now, these are very much analog, traditional mechanical gauges that don't have a digital interface for producing metrics or output. So the idea is that they typically would have somebody go out there, read these gauges, and then make adjustments based on what they said. Instead of replacing all the gauges with digitals that they would have to revalidate that they would work and recalibrate, they found that the least frictional path to getting into the AWS cloud on this was by actually putting IP cameras in front of the gauges to read the gauges. Now, this was pretty good. The problem is the IP cameras were quite a few. They had about 1,000 plus in this one particular facility. And then the admins had problems managing all the IP cameras. So what they did was they took a Greengrass instance and they deployed that in their environment and then ran some Lambda functions on top of it. Now, these Lambda functions were designed to go out and check the IP camera images and grab the image itself and then send the image back to IoT Core where it could be routed over, I believe they were using Kinesis to send it into S3. So now they have an image of what that gauge looks like and they keep checking it over time. Pretty simple little piece here. Keep in mind that none of this was really IoT related. They were just using Greengrass as a way to get a Lambda function locally to go and retrieve the data and then push it back to IoT Core. So really more of like a messaging utilization of those tools. Pretty interesting stuff. Beyond that, they went even farther and they took a Greengrass SageMaker model and actually has SageMaker going out there and looking at the images that it's taking now and gathering the actual metric information off of the gauges. So now they've technically digitized their old school analog gauges by having these cameras read it, take the picture, do the image recognition on it, and then turn it into a digital metric. So in the end, they were able to get all of that digitization they were looking for done by leveraging interesting tools in the IoT and also in the machine learning space. Very cool stuff. Can't wait to maybe go home and check out how to play around with some of those pieces on my own. The other cool session I got to go to yesterday on Wednesday was on global storage and Lambda functions. And it was another one of my favorite sessions this week because of the way that the guy really put the session together. It was really interesting. Great presenter. I think it was Rob Hilton. I'll have to double check. Take a look in the description there and I'll get you the name. But the basic model was talking about like film crews. So you imagine the Netflix and Amazon Prime teams and the various teams of Hollywood that are out there filming. Now, a lot of film crews will have teams running all over the world, in Europe, in South America, in Australia, in the United States, and they often need to work on common sets of media assets that they're recording or capturing or editing across the planet and still need all of their teams to use. So in this lab, we went through and we took a look at how to use the Lambda functions to go through and actually copy assets between different buckets in different locations. And they even had some other interesting pieces on there where they were adding like a checkout process so that once somebody had checked out a particular asset, nobody else could make changes to it. And there was also a super admin part of it. Pretty interesting stuff. The other part that they used in the background was storage gateway to drive the final connectivity down to the workstations where the video graphic designers are working. So with Storage Gateway, you've got CIFS, SMB, and NFS style shares that can be created and then easily attached to a variety of Linux and Windows workstations and servers as well. Pretty slick stuff. So Lambda does the background synchronization for us between buckets in different regions. And then Storage Gateway handles actually replicating and syncing all that data down to the workstations and the volumes locally wherever the film crews are so that they can access that media. Pretty cool stuff. A couple of technologies that I'd worked with individually but hadn't seen them paired up quite in this way. Great stuff. Now, the next thing that I wanted to talk about here to kind of get into my week at reInvent was something you may have heard me talking about earlier this week, and that was inclusion, opportunity, and activism, and kind of thinking about how organizations like AWS and the broader world of technology companies that are represented here this week can really begin making a difference. You heard me talking about sustainability earlier this week. AWS also has all of their grab-and-go lunches, and a lot of their food here is being served on compostable dishes and compostable plates and packaging. So that's a really cool, another example of how they're ensuring that topic is here, and we're given a chance to kind of make sure that we're taking a chance to reduce that impact on it. But the other side of it was a couple of organizational activities like the We Power Tech organization. This is the diversity enablement teams here at AWS, and it's all about making sure that we have minorities, women, people of color, people of every ethnicity being represented in the tech space, and in particular with Amazon Web Services, because AWS has got a very broad reach, and the more impact that they can bring as an organization, as an industry leader, the larger we can potentially see those ripples spread throughout the industry. So 4 really amazing women at this particular session that I went to. We Power Tech is a pretty large program, and I sat in on a session with, let's see, it was Teresa Carlson, Eva Chen from Trend Micro, Amy Gradnick, and then Lakeisha Grant Shepard as well. They were all the 4 panelists. And the topic was on growth and abundance mentality, specifically talking about women in technology or minorities in technology. And of course, for me, as a white dude going to this conference, I have a lot to learn and gain from the voices of these individuals. And so I was really interested to hear about what I can do because I live in this technology world. I have children, I have a daughter, I have a wife, and I have a lot of friends who live in this space as well and have been affected by various types of inclusion problems over the years, whether they be super egregious or whether they be kind of mild interactions on the side. Everybody's felt and experienced this in some way. And so one of the big things that they were really talking about was bringing pillars of practices to your organization, thinking about learning and transparency, creating affinity and ally models where we can ensure that people who have a voice who maybe don't always get to have a voice are brought to the table more effectively. And probably the most important thing that I could try to reach out to is to try to think about people who are in a place of influence or a place of power or influence in your organization. If you're in one of those positions, then you are possibly one of the most important pieces in this equation here because you can be an ally and you can create a space to allow a voice that may not have been heard before to be heard or to be supported in a way that maybe it's not being done. We think about plants growing in a garden, they take attention and focus in order for some of these things to come to fruition. And that is exactly where we are. We're on an edge of being able to create a much more inclusive environment in workplaces all around the world. And so it starts by looking at those who are in a place of power, making an opportunity to become allies and raise those voices of others. I saw somebody else talking recently about imagine just how limited our organizations are when we don't have as many voices as possible being brought to it. So this was a really powerful message. One of the other key things that I think that they were really chatting about was also the notion of changing the hiring, review, and staffing process, looking for opportunities to make sure that we're placing people on the teams in an inclusive, diverse way, but then also making sure that when it comes time to do reviews and look at the performance of employees, we're recognizing employees who are encouraging allies, who are encouraging creating space like this as well. These are all areas where by increasing those sorts of mechanisms to encourage that sort of performance and that sort of behavior is going to generally help everybody across the board.
I would say the mentor program, but always assign the mentor and mentee totally different person. Totally different one, and make sure that they talk their way.
I like that. For me, I would say evaluate where you're spending your time. So really take an honest look at yourself, who you're surrounding yourself with, and surround yourself with the people that build your energy and that don't drain it.
Leticia?
I would say lead by example. You guys have an opportunity to meet others that are in this audience, and you know that they're open to wanting to advance their careers, and most importantly, to share with you. So start today by networking and making sure that you're sharing your experiences with those around you, and that includes starting today with just those who are sitting right next to you on your road.
I'm going to give you one. Go write your own job description. Decide what you want to do next. Write your job description. Take it to your manager and say, here's what I want to do. Here's why I'm going to be great at doing it. I did that. I've never taken a job in the last 15 years that I didn't write my own job description. And if you do that, you'll be successful.
So I just want to say thanks again to the We Power Tech folks. There's quite a few other sides to We Power Tech. If you're interested in hearing more about it or how you can help, I'll share some link information down there in the description. Please do check them out. And again, props to AWS for helping create this powerful organization and spread a very powerful message at an important time in our nation and in our world's history here. One of the final things I thought was cool about that We Power Tech session is they started out by recognizing the native tribal lands that the casino was built on where we're holding this conference right now, which in my mind is one of the great tragedies of the American history, looking back at some of the terrible things that have happened, the many, many terrible things that have happened. So just to kind of put it back in there, all is not lost. We have a great opportunity to set a new bar and move forward. And so I really want to kind of give a shout out to everybody out there who has an opportunity to help affect and move this forward. Let's get it going and let's make it a lot stronger. One of the final things that I wanted to chat about this morning at reInvent was the 3 Square Backpacks program that we got into. Yesterday and on Tuesdays, they had these backpack stuffing stations set up where they had a whole bunch of non-perishable food set up, and basically they just needed help going through and bagging it up into individual sections. The basic idea is that a lot of children here in Las Vegas and in the broader world don't have access to meals, or they're in an unsteady position where they may not have access to enough food throughout the week. And particularly when they're out of their public school situations, they may not have access to the breakfasts and lunches that are normally available through some of those educational places. So the Backpacks for Hunger program was a chance for us to fill these bags, and they will go around and send this food home with children all around Las Vegas on the weekends to ensure that they have access to food until they can get back to some of the other subsidy programs that are available out there. So really powerful stuff. And what I thought was cool is yesterday we were seeing people going through the line again and again, just going through, filling bags, trying to do as much as you can. And I think this really resonates with me. I know that in our day and age, especially as a father, we look at the news, we hear some of the disparaging things that are happening around us, and it can be overwhelming, it can be depressing. And so often I'm struggling as a fix-it, as a solver, troubleshooting type of person, like, what can I do? How do I fix this problem? Well, the troubling news is we can't just fix it completely, okay? One person's actions is not going to be enough. But when you have some small things like this that we can do, it begins creating momentum. And let's face it, momentum can add up to be something much bigger. And so hopefully some of the ripples that we created this week here at reInvent will stick with people. And that's part of why I'm bringing this voice and kind of making sure that these stories get as much focus as all of the cool services that AWS has brought out as well. Because let's face it, as much fun as it is to write web apps and solve data problems and work with streaming and machine learning technologies and all the other fun stuff we do at AWS, we still live in a world that has a lot of problems. And I hope that through some of these actions and some of the Builders Fair projects and through some of the advocacy that I've seen demonstrated this week, we can continue doing those exciting things with technology and also maybe really saving ourselves and humanity in a big way and maybe really driving ourselves into the next generation of what humanity's future looks like. So a couple more things to get into at reInvent today. I'm going to go off and check out that Warner Vogel's Expo announcements, and then I'm also going to be jumping into a session this morning about serverless CI/CD pipelines for Lambda. Really excited about that. So a little bit more updates to come to you guys. Tonight is replay. It's really kind of winding down to the end of the week. At this point, I'll probably hit you guys up with some light videos later in the week, and then I will be sure to provide some coverage when I get back to Asheville. So until then, my friends, remember to consider your role in the larger picture, and beyond that, we'll see you in the cloud.